We're going out to pool right now. Just letting you know. Hot mic. Okay. Okay. The other thing is, because it's weighted and heavy, I was scared that if we don't tape it down, if they go to move it, it could fall and hurt somebody. So, yeah. So I'm just going to... Sure we can still hear. Marco, can you still hear? Audio check test. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nikki, can you hear me back there okay if I'm talking? Okay. The air is a little bit loud, and I'm going to lock these footers down.
Yeah. Check 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got it? Awesome.
You're welcome. I'm going to leave the mics up. Can I borrow that gap? just spent the last 40 minutes figuring all the audio out. So, yeah, I think we're okay. I don't think so, yeah. But thank you. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Do you want me to move this one?
What do you mean? Okay. Yeah, I'm just putting my own mic on.
Welcome, everybody. I'm sorry we have to be here. I'm Congressman Dan Goldman from New York City. We are here following Donald Trump's pardoning of more than 1,500 convicted criminals who stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021, violently attacked law enforcement officers, injuring more than 170 of them, including two who are here today with us, Officer Daniel Hodges and retired Officer Harry Dunn. The pardoned defendants and convicted criminals, all of those who were convicted, of course, were convicted by either a unanimous jury of 12 or they admitted guilt to the crimes that they were charged with, included more than 600 who were charged with violent offenses, with assault. And yet on Monday, Donald Trump decided that he wants to whitewash history, pretend that the riot of January 6th never happened, and that it was simply a peaceful walk through the Capitol. Unfortunately for him, video and photographs don't lie. And we've all seen the video. We've all seen the video of Officer Hodges in the well of the Capitol having his gas mask ripped off. We've seen the video of Officer Fanone, who was carried outside and who was tased by one of the defendants, one of the criminals who was released. And not surprisingly, those who have been released have made their intentions clear. These are far-right, violent extremists who have engaged in political violence, now set free by the President of the United States and encouraged, emboldened, inspired to not only fight on his behalf, but to commit violence on his behalf. This is effectively a militia that Donald Trump has created to support his political wishes and his personal wishes, which are always overlapped with his political wishes. We are here today to emphasize a couple of things. And first and foremost is that Donald Trump's pardons are a complete abandonment of all of the men and women in law enforcement around this country. The Capitol Police officers, the Metropolitan Police Department officers who protected the Capitol that day, who protected members of Congress, senators, the Vice President, put their lives on the line to do their job. And the rioters, the masses that Donald Trump sent to the Capitol, invaded that Capitol and assaulted many of the officers on their way. You cannot say you back the blue if you are going to let out of jail violent criminals who assaulted the blue. So I don't want to hear Donald Trump or any of the congressional Republicans who refuse to speak out against these unjust and unconscionable pardons say that they support our law enforcement officers, because they do not. And we now are all here in the Capitol building where some of those defendants were walking today, having to wonder whether they're going to reenact the violence that they committed on January 6th. Officer Hodges works here today. We all work here. What impact is that going to have? Because if there's a single member of Congress who starts worrying about his or her safety or that of their family's safety, and that impacts the job that they do in any way, that is how democracy crumbles. That is how authoritarianism takes over. Because if there are personal safety concerns that influence the way that we elected officials do our job, then we cannot represent our constituents in the way that we took an oath to do. And that's not because of us. That's because Donald Trump has set out a militia on this body, on this building. And we rely on Officer Hodges and other Capitol Police to protect us, but they also have to be worried. And it's simply unacceptable that the President of the United States would release so many violent criminals, so many people, some of which were convicted of seditious conspiracy, a very rarely charged crime. And it's simply unacceptable. And we're here to bring light to that. I'm honored today to be joined by three other members, Congresswoman Chrissy Houlahan from Pennsylvania, Congressman Jason Crow from Colorado, Congressman Eric Swalwell from California, and as well as Officer Dunn and Hodges, and I will pass it on over to Congressman Crow.
Thank you, Congressman Goldman. It's always an honor to stand here with my colleagues, and especially an honor to stand here with these heroic officers, Officer Hodges of the Metropolitan Police Department and Officer Dunn, formerly of the U.S. Capitol Police. Listen, this is very simple. Donald Trump inspired a mob that came and descended on this Capitol, surrounded the Capitol, trapped me and many of my colleagues in the House chamber, and brutally attacked hundreds of officers, wounding over 140 of them. What a shameful day today, or yesterday, that he then went and pardoned hundreds of violent criminals. Regardless of your political background, the letter behind your name, it shouldn't take any partisanship to condemn an act of pardoning violent criminals who brutally beat police officers. But that is exactly what happened. And we are going to retell that story over and over and over again, because it's what these officers standing behind me deserve. It's what the other officers who stand guard today deserve. It's what police officers around this country who put their lives on the line for our community safety deserve. Our backing and support when they do their duty, when they do their job every day, not the lawlessness, the chaos, and the disregard for order and rule of law that Donald Trump represents. So with that, it is my honor to turn this over to my colleague, Chrissy Houlahan from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Representative Crow, and good afternoon. It is an honor and a privilege and very humbling to be standing here amongst these heroes, as Rep. Crow mentioned, Officer Dunn and Officer Hodges. I'm grateful to you for your service. I'm Chrissy Houlahan. I come from just up the road, our nation's birthplace, the Philadelphia area. And as an elected official from that area, and frankly, elected officials from all areas, most of us engage in very sincere efforts to be very nuanced and to be not too polarizing with the way we talk to our communities and the words that we choose. We choose phrases like deeply disappointed or extremely worrisome or very concerned frequently to express a whole lot of ranges of agreement and disagreement. But today, those kinds of words really fail us because they're totally and completely inadequate to describe our feelings as we stand here. Because I'm here this afternoon, personally as a veteran who's taken an oath to defend our homeland and to keep us all safe from dangers both foreign and domestic. I'm also here as the daughter and granddaughter of veterans. I'm here as a person with family who served as police and police chiefs, and as someone who deeply and daily is grateful to the men and women and all of the people who take these oaths to protect and to defend us all. To say that the only reasonable response to President Trump's blanket pardon of more than 1,500 supporters who assaulted police when they stormed the U.S. Capitol 4 years ago is a shock or an outrage or a profound sense of outrage and betrayal is not adequate enough. So many of you all may not call this an insurrection, but I do, or you may not think President Trump was at fault. I do. But there can be no disagreement, and Rep. Crow talked about this, about the impact. People died. 150 officers were physically injured that day, and many others to this moment are continuing to experience trauma that requires medical help. This was, and there's no other way to describe it, political violence. And for our nation's commander-in-chief to literally give the worst of these perpetrators a pardon is chilling. So just in Pennsylvania alone, just up the road from where I come, 100 people, convicted felons, are free now and free to roam up to the Pennsylvania area to return to our communities today because of the actions of our commander-in-chief. By very definition, these are threats to our national security. This should, independent of our political affiliation, alarm us all, even the president's supporters, many of whom appropriately elected him because of a need, in their opinion, for a nation of law and order. President Trump and I disagree on a lot, and I'm sure that we'll spend the next 4 years expressing deep disappointment with one another, with worry and concern over differences in policy. That's normal. That's the back and forth between parties and how best to advance our country. We can agree to disagree. But blanket pardons such as these, and at this scale, are simply obscene. I have no other word to describe it. Let me repeat, this was political violence, plain and simple, and for our nation's commander-in-chief to literally give the worst of these violent offenders and perpetrators a pardon is obscene. And let's be clear, these pardons are a message to President Trump's most violent supporters that he has their back, that violence committed in his name is protected, and that violence committed against law enforcement officers is protected. And this should be a warning to us all. So I have a couple of action items for you all. I call on President Trump's supporters to be cautious and to please think independently. I call on Republican leaders here and elsewhere to do more for the sake of this country to restrain President Trump's worst impulses. If I could tell you the number of times I heard people, members of the Republican Party in the hallways today talking about this and being despondent about it, but none publicly, it would really disappoint many of you. I'll call on the press as well. Please stay on this story and do not let the Trump administration overwhelm you with other news of the day, news that's less important. And finally, I call on Americans who have the loudest voice of all of us to speak up and to say that this is not okay, that when we say that we support men and women in blue and the law and order that they bring with it, that we follow through with this, our promise, and our actions. I'll conclude by saying as our nation approaches its 250th birthday next year, we'll spend a lot of time inevitably looking back and celebrating our strength and our history, our values, and the ideals that have nurtured us and brought us here, this American dream. Too many of us take that for granted when we should be vigilant and fiercely protective of us and our history. So I want us to leave with a warning from our founding father, the founding father of Pennsylvania's very own Benjamin Franklin, who described our new nation, and this still indeed today is a very new nation, as a republic, but only if we can keep it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to stand in solidarity. With that, I have the privilege of introducing Congressman Swalwell.
Thank you, Chrissy. And thank you, Dan Goldman, for organizing this, and to Jason and the officers. My name is Eric Swalwell. I'm the son of a police officer. I have two brothers who today still walk the beat. I'm a former prosecutor, so I can tell the difference between a cop and a convict. And Donald Trump just unleashed and released into our communities over 1,000 criminals, many of them who committed violent acts. And nothing about what Donald Trump did erases what those individuals did on January 6th. Nothing erases what they did. But we should erase this concept that Donald Trump and the Republican Party have the backs of law enforcement officers. Donald Trump does not back the blue. He backs the coup. And this action makes that absolutely clear. I was in the chamber on January 6th, and I'm eternally grateful to Officers Hodges and Dunn, Officer Mike Fanone, Sergeant Gunnell, Officer Sicknick, who lost his life that day. And I want to just remind everyone, particularly my Republican colleagues, that these individuals were not convicted at jury trials. Overwhelmingly, they pled guilty. And it's okay if they were convicted at jury trials, and some of them were, but overwhelmingly, they pled guilty. They confessed. They pled guilty because they are guilty, including the individual who brought the most trauma to Officer Fanone by tasing him, causing a heart attack and a traumatic brain injury, now released into our communities. So why would Donald Trump do this? He's doing it because he knows he is principally responsible for the violence on January 6th. And so for Donald Trump to self-exonerate, he has to exonerate them. And if he exonerates them, then he believes that his own hands are clean. They're not clean. We're not going away. It's said that history is written by the winners. Donald Trump won an election, but he has not won the truth. So we're not going to let this going away. We're going to hold our Republican colleagues to account. They have a very thin majority in this caucus. They could not do anything in the last Congress without the majority of the votes coming from Democrats. So we're going to stand up for law enforcement. We're going to stand up for our democracy. And this story is not yet complete. And with that, I do want to introduce one of the heroes of that day, and that's a former Capitol Hill police officer, Harry Dunn.
Good afternoon. Forgive me for the Fetterman get up. I like to be comfortable talking about uncomfortable things. Was just going to talk off my head, the top of my head, and I know I could get a little carried away, a little emotional, angry. I mean, if you're not, something's the matter with you. But I did write down something that I did want to make sure that I say. Donald Trump made what he did a campaign promise. He was clear about where he stood. He was proud of the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. He made this very clear on January 7th, 2021. Anyone pretending to be outraged and shocked and surprised, you just haven't been paying attention. The Republican Party has long claimed to be the party of law and order. Back to blue. However, many lawmakers' silence and refusal to push back against Donald Trump's actions make it incredibly hard to take that claim serious. Many of the officers that were brutally assaulted that day are the same officers who protected Donald Trump on Monday. Think about that for a minute. Just sit with that for a minute. The same people that Donald Trump sent to a mob to attack are the same people that made sure he was safe on Monday. They're the same officers who protect members of Congress every day, to include Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. He has a security detail. Mike Johnson's security detail spends more time with him than they do their own families. So these Republican members that are scared or whatever, lack the courage to speak out against what Donald Trump has done. Like the Congresswoman said, they tell you in private that's not good enough. That's what I just wanted to make sure I said. Now I'll just rant off the top of my head. I'm upset. It's been 4 years of us, he's off, Danny, Sergeant Gannell, who's not here right now. Sergeant Gannell would love to be here right now. He's struggling, like a lot of us are. He would love to be here. We've been saying the same thing for 4 years. A lot of reporters called me and asked me to react to the news of the pardon. What more do you want me to say? What can I say differently that I haven't been saying for 4 years? His supporters, his encouragers, his enablers in Congress didn't say anything when Donald Trump told you exactly what he was going to do. My outrage, sure, it lies with Donald Trump. It lies with, absolutely. But I think I'm more upset at the people who are more surprised now and shocked now that Donald Trump did what he said he was going to do from the start. Christopher Wray called these individuals domestic terrorists. Y'all didn't win. Y'all not going to win. On January 6th, I was surrounded by a group of brave men and women who refused to quit. I'm really honored right now to be standing surrounded by some brave men and women right now in the Congress. I really appreciate you all. The winner writes history. He ain't win. He's not going to. I'm not going away. That's it. Sorry, Danny Goldman. Yeah, Danny.
No, I'm going to just say one quick story about Officer Hodges before I introduce him. Officer Hodges just finished his 6th straight 12-hour day protecting the Capitol for the inauguration of Donald Trump. Many people have seen that video. I had the opportunity to meet with him in July of 2021 in preparation for the first hearing of the January 6th Select Committee. And I was speechless after he told his story, his emotions pouring out. And that was 3.5 years ago. And it is shocking that we are here and that all of the effort and the work and the pain that these officers have gone through have tried to be erased by Donald Trump. Officer Hodges.
Good evening. I'm here today in my personal capacity, and I hope you'll forgive me if I am a bit scattered because, as the congressman said, I've been working pretty much nonstop since last Friday, I think, for Donald Trump's second inauguration. Working to make sure that everyone who came to D.C. had adequate law enforcement services, that they were protected, that the transfer of power was peaceful. It was kind of surreal on Inauguration Day, having all these people wearing MAGA hats. They saw me and they saw my uniform. They didn't recognize who I was, but they thanked me for my service. And it reminded me of January 6th, 2021, because on that morning, they thanked me for my service too. And then they went into the ellipse and listened to Donald Trump speak. And Trump was told they were armed and he didn't care. He told them they had to fight. Fight, fight, fight. And then he sent them to the Capitol. And once they went to the Capitol, they didn't thank me anymore. They called me a traitor, telling me to remember my oath. I was beaten, crushed, kicked, punched, surrounded. Someone reached underneath my visor, tried to gouge out my eye. And all these people were just pardoned by Donald Trump, who says that they were the real victims, that they were the patriots. I don't understand how anyone can believe that. Donald Trump, everything he is, everything he stands for is anathema to me. But he is the President of the United States, and he's going to leverage that power in terrible ways. And one of the first ways he chose to do that was to pardon everyone from January 6th who tried to stop the transfer of power and usurp the will of the people. I hope that the guardrails that remain in our government are sufficient to preserve the republic for the next 4 years. And I would encourage everyone watching to look with fresh eyes on what Donald Trump is doing, what he's saying, and continually ask yourself if this is who you want to represent yourself to your children, to everyone else in the world, to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family. Because while he has been elected, those in Congress who enable him are still answerable to you. And they're afraid of losing their jobs precisely because too many people offer their unwavering support for Donald Trump. If you begin to think, even a little bit, that we can do better than Trump, then their support for him might waver too. And he's not going to be able to ram through his horrific agenda quite as easily. All that being said, the people who attacked us on January 6th are free now. They can try it again. And they'll know, if they try it again in the next 4 years, they know they'll get pardoned again. But that doesn't matter. Myself, I'll be there if I'm needed. I'll do it all again. Members of the Capitol Police, MPD, will be there. Thank you.
As Officer Dunn said, we invited Sergeant Aquilino Ganell to join us today, but he declined because he's understandably very upset with what has happened. But he sent a statement that I'm going to read. On January 6, 2021, I was just doing my job and fulfilling my oath to defend this country. American citizens attacked the Capitol, injuring me and my colleagues. We, the officers, protected all elected officials, regardless of their political party. For nearly 25 years, I have served this country honorably in the Army and as a police officer. I have cried, sweat, and bled for this nation at home and abroad against foreign and domestic threats without hesitation. I am an immigrant from the Dominican Republic, a naturalized citizen, who nearly lost my life defending the Constitution and the rule of law in the building that President Trump was just inaugurated in. It's worth noting that many of the officers who guarded his inauguration were violently assaulted by the people that President Trump pardoned later that day. And Trump only pardoned them because they committed crimes under his banner and were fighting for him. These were rioters who attacked police officers. In my case, more than 40 rioters assaulted me. I sustained multiple injuries and underwent 2 surgeries, repairing my right foot and left shoulder. I had cuts and bruises all over my body that day. Yet, despite my injuries, I showed up to work on January 7th. Exhausted, traumatized, injured, and betrayed, I continued protecting those same lawmakers who turned their backs on us. For a party that claims to have the high moral ground when defending the rule of law, law and order, and backing the blue, these pardons are the height of hypocrisy. The veil has been lifted. The Republican Party does not support the officers who saved their lives from the enraged mob who made them run in fear for their lives. At the tunnel entrance, I risked it all. I was maced, overwhelmed, and attacked for trying to prevent the marauders from hunting members of Congress room by room. Yet Republican elected officials turned their backs on us. They refused to acknowledge the siege. They excused and condoned what transpired instead of denouncing and condemning the assault. The Republican members who we protect every day continue to invite the attackers to return to the crime scene and personally give them guided tours of the Capitol. They are welcomed as heroes, but treat the officers as thugs, dishonoring our service of saving their lives. They refuse to install a plaque with the names of the officers who defended the tunnel entrance as mandated by their own laws. It's a miscarriage of justice, a betrayal, a mockery, and a desecration of the men and women that risked their lives defending our democracy. I thank President Biden for issuing preemptive pardons for me and my colleagues. I did not seek a pardon because I did nothing wrong, but my family and I are grateful for unnecessary measures. I never thought honoring my oath to protect and serve and speak truth to power would require a pardon to protect us from those very same people who claim to support police officers, the rule of law, and the preservation of our democratic system of governance. Because that is what I did to the point of nearly losing my life. And to many Republicans, that's my greatest sin. Sergeant Aquilino Ganell. We're happy to open up to any questions for anyone here.
Not surprised. Lauren Boebert was at the D.C. jail yesterday and thanked everybody that was released and said she would be happy to give them tours of the Capitol. However, myself and Michael Fanone went to meet with Lauren Boebert to ask her why she voted against giving the U.S. Capitol Police the Congressional Gold Medal. She refused to meet with us. I'm not surprised. And we're going to see a lot more of that.
I heard that Stuart Rhodes was petitioning GOP members to try and secure the release of whatever remaining January 6 convicts there are. I guess he's trying to fill out the ranks of his new militia.
Well, it's definitely been increased rhetoric and hateful stuff, but nothing I don't believe that warrants rises to the level of me alerting the authorities. My personal awareness has definitely shot up. But let's be clear. I mean, they want you to be afraid. They want you to stop talking. That's their mission. And I mean, yeah, we've already seen what they're capable of, what they're willing to do. So I don't want to be naive to think that they wouldn't do something or try to do something. But I'm not prepared to live in fear because that means they win.
I will just add that it didn't take long for many of these convicted criminals, violent extremists, to declare what their intentions are. I think before he even got out of prison, the QAnon shaman tweeted that he was being released and he was going to go buy some expletive guns. Enrico Terrio, the leader of the Proud Boys, who was convicted of seditious conspiracy and sentenced to 22 years before he was fully pardoned, went on a right-wing radio show and started talking about how this was just the beginning and that we need to spend the next 4 years making whatever this is permanent for 100 years. So it didn't take long for them to reveal what their intentions are, and it shouldn't be a surprise to us given that Christopher Wray, the FBI director, has repeatedly said that domestic violent extremism is the greatest threat to our homeland security.
Sure. I also saw the news about the creation of this select subcommittee under the Judiciary Committee. It is, of course, a farce that is intended to try to cover up their abuse of process in Donald Trump's pardons, right? They don't want to talk about what Donald Trump is doing. They don't want us to be telling the story like these officers are today. So it's another diversion. It's another distraction. in an attempt to rewrite history, but also to confuse folks. But, you heard pretty clearly today that we're not confused and we're not distracted, nor will we be. We're going to continue to tell the story loudly, clearly, repeatedly about the criminality, about the abuse, not just of power, but of our law enforcement, of the blue, and we're not going to stop.
Well, he's right about one thing. There's nothing like January 6th that's ever happened in our country before. Donald Trump is not a friend of the police. What Donald Trump is a friend to is anyone or anything that flatters him, increases his wealth, or secures his power. Now, through his life, he has attained a great deal of wealth and power, and allegedly. And it's our law enforcement's duty to uphold the law, and that involves protecting him. So he appreciates that aspect of law enforcement and that we guarantee his safety and his place in society until the voters choose differently. And as for inviting these people into the White House, I mean, yeah, of course he would do that. He recorded them singing the national anthem and played it at his rallies. He's absolutely tied himself to these people, and he can't let go of that, because if he were ever able to come close to the truth, he would have to admit his own role in the insurrection, and that's never going to happen.
They want to be remembered as heroes. Danny, myself, I think I speak for every single other officer. We don't want that title. I just want accountability. They're seeking to go down in history, and I'm seeking to make sure our history continues. But it's no surprise that that's their rhetoric. They believe that. It's insulting, but it's expected. Like I said, it's been 4 years of dealing with this, and, I'm almost tired of talking, but that caveat, the winner, they want you to stop talking. I can't, no matter how tired of it I am. And I think that's what my message to everybody listening and watching, you can't stop. We can't quit. Just, if everybody threw their hands up and said, I'm done with this, when anything got hard, slavery would still be legal. Women wouldn't have the right to vote. There are so many things in this lifetime that have been it seemed impossible to attain. And this may be one of them. But it's worth it, and that's why I'm still going.
You cannot normalize Donald Trump's actions. We cannot pay attention to what he says, because everything he says is a lie or belied by his actions. The American people need to pay attention to his actions. He paid a lot of lip service to helping the middle class during the campaign. He even said it on Monday in his inauguration address. There is not a single executive order that he has issued over the last 3 days that helps the middle class. In fact, the only one that really relates to the economy increases the prices of prescription drugs, undoing what President Biden has done. And then when he's confronted with the fact that that man right behind Officer Dunn in the red was released after tasing Officer Fanone, you know what Donald Trump's response was? We'll take a look at that. What do you mean we'll take a look at that? You just pardoned him. There's nothing to take a look at. You take a look before you make this decision. But this decision was as much about himself and rewriting history for himself as it is about the criminals that he let free. And we all have to hold him accountable. Thank you all.
Thanks, Kevin.